Today we talk to Debbie. Debbie works for a fintech called Biz2Credit, but she has also worked for Goldman for several years. So stay tuned, it's going to be very interesting. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to our new podcast episode, and we have a very special guest today, Debbie. Debbie, it's great you take the time to talk to us.
Thanks for reaching out. I'm very happy to join you. Would you like to hear a little bit about me?
I would love to hear a bit about you. Who are you, Debbie?
Sure. So again, Debbie Kemp. I have I've passion for human capital for quite a few years, and we'll share more of that in a little bit. Just a little bit about me. I grew up I grew up in Kansas City, so I'm from the Midwest of the United States, and I have I moved to New York not too long after graduating from college, and I really, in theory, have never left. I love working. I love living in this area, and it enables me to have, from a career perspective, lots of opportunities, and which is, both globally and domestically, and also enables me to travel, as well. One other kind of fun tidbit is I am also a small business owner now, and so it's really fun to have maybe another ball to juggle, as well as what I call my my day job, which is my time in working focused on people.
Tell me, why did you join the HR space in the first place?
Really great question. I think I fell into it is probably the best way. And
I hope you landed softly.
Yeah, well, I did land softly. I was, I was in a subway back and forth commuting. I was helping someone I had met, was working on a project at Goldman, and needed some assistance, and so I started helping him on it. Anyway, long story short, another individual was on the subway back and forth, and he needed some assistance. He was taking on a new role at Goldman, and wanted some help in building out the function. And so knew that I was very project-based, efficient with my time, what have you, and said, would you join? And I laughed because I've never really done any recruiting or any building of any function. And that was really my foray into HR.
Okay, that sounds like a story that's hard to believe, but I definitely trust you. It's true.
It's definitely true. That was really my first role at Goldman as a full-time employee, was helping Dick Roll, Scott Pincus build out the mortgage research function. So it really was. I was interviewing PhD candidates, and my question to them was, how do I know a good PhD candidate from another, to be part of this research team? And they just said, you'll know. And so that's how I started campus recruiting. I think I did a good job. Many of these individuals now have gone on to run their own hedge funds. So there was they saw something in me that I think gave me confidence to then build out. And I can tell you more later on kind of the opportunities that I had at Goldman to really focus on HR and people.
Okay, you need to tell me more about how did you end up in New York in the first place?
So that was I was skiing in Utah and met a guy, and that he had recently moved to, he was in New York. He was moving from Merrill Lynch to Goldman. This is actually the guy that introduced me to Goldman Sachs. And this project that we were working on had to do with technology. We were going from the big Cray computers, the big computers, to desktop computers, and they needed to put in a local area network. And so funny enough, I have arms and legs, and I can figure this out. I can crawl under a desk and connect things. And so I helped them build out the LAN, both at Goldman, Bankers Trust, and Merrill Lynch. as a consultant originally. And so that, one thing led to another, and that's how I ended up in New York. And then that's really how I ended up full-time at Goldman, was that, that experience. So you just never know where you, by taking those opportunities what they might lead to.
Sounds like it is a super interesting life you've had. So it's absolutely amazing. And well, we talked before about like areas where we have potentially already met in the past. In Lower Manhattan, obviously, you were working at Goldman, me working for Deutsche Bank then, and you just mentioned Bankers Trust, so which we I think acquired in 1999, right? So it's like a pretty long story already, or pretty long career you're already having in New York.
I have. It's been great. Again, just briefly at, Goldman, I was there 20 years. And I think that what I learned there, it has enabled me to continue to grow my career. And that was that, again, you have to be open to new challenges and new opportunities. And I think that that's what Goldman gave me, or I learned at Goldman, was whether, I was getting tapped on the shoulder to, hey, we need some help here, or I'd raise my hand and say, I'm interested in, I was in multiple divisions. One was, we actually created a new division out of fixed income called investment management. And there we created GS.com. So I was, recruiting, building these functions, and I can just, when I think about what I've done from a people perspective, is at investment management, we created our own diversity initiatives, which then went global. There were things that we started to do in how we communicate, and town halls, and, really building engagement. We were able to do within this one division that then we actually took global at Goldman. And I think that that's just, that doesn't always happen. But I think that, again, the culture at Goldman enabled that and really provided that opportunity. So yeah, a lot of time there, but I think really good. The one other piece of experience that I gained there was in mergers and acquisitions. And I think something that, we've talked about at one point was, that's really, I think my superpower is in M&A, and it's really ensuring that employees that are part of that integration or that acquisition are integrated and engaged, because, they're not always successful. I think the ones that I've worked on have been very successful because I've taken the time to work with the team and ensure that we're communicating in a way that employees feel like they have everything that they need in this new org.
Well, talking about Goldman, it's obviously a name that is, well, it is so much mystification around Goldman. How were your first days at Goldman back then?
A blast. It was really fun. I did not know what growing up in Kansas City, Goldman wasn't a household name. Merrill Lynch was, because they had a retail piece, right, or financial advising piece at that point in time, but not Goldman. So I didn't really know what to expect. And I think coming in as a non-traditional hire also made that a unique experience. I had met many of the partners who, you may know today, and in a way that was just, day job, right? They had a job to do and I had a job to do. And so it was, I learned how to talk to a trader in 3 seconds and get what I needed out of it, like tell them what I needed and get the answer back and move on. And so I think part of that became a pace issue, it was an issue. I'd say it was fun, right? So it really was very engaging. Yeah, I mean, I know people may say I drank that Kool-Aid. I did. I had a really, really great experience there, and am a big fan because of what we were able to do. There was a lot of freedom. It's all about the team.
You talked about values at Goldman, and how you also influence those values, like with initiatives. How did you start those initiatives back then?
Oh, I think it was just identifying a need. So with diversity, I mean, again, dates me a bit, but I say back there we didn't we didn't think about diversity as we have over the years from there. I think what we were interested in is, how do we learn to celebrate? How do we start celebrating and I've used this before, but our differences. So it's one is acknowledging that someone may have a different, a different holiday. I mean, I think about the Indian, because I'm now in a very, Indian-based founder-led company. Diwali is really important, right? It's an important holiday. So when I was at Goldman, it was looking at the cultures of our employees and how do we start creating different months, right? And celebration, and really creating events that were focused on educating and enrolling our employees in those differences, and kind of knowing. So that's how, I mean, again, that's how I approached it. I still spend time approaching it in that way. And it's looking at the employees wherever or whatever the organization I'm in, and how do we connect them even globally, right? So back then we had employees, in EMEA or in APAC, and how do we, again, help us all feel together. So that was diversity. I mean, there's lots of other ones we did, but yeah.
And I think it's nowadays great that more and more companies identify diversity as a real strength, right? As well, diversity of ideas, diversity of backgrounds, so that it helps so much in not having the same ideas over and over again, but to like have people from different backgrounds, from you just mentioned Diwali, so having also different different DNA now. Getting in.
Yeah, and you brought up the differences in thoughts. I think that's something that, like when I was at Velocity and it was more tech focused, it really, we couldn't recruit from exactly the same schools that we'd always recruited from, or hire, again, exactly the same, because we wouldn't have gotten the innovative thoughts or product development that we needed to have. And so, I think it becomes, how do you source, part of it is sourcing talent, differently or in additional, right? So I feel like there's multiple ways to source, and campus recruiting is one, right? And we did a lot of that at Goldman and organically grew our talent. But introducing additional sourcing there or strategies is really important, because that brings in the I think a very diverse workforce, and again, because diversity's got there's many components to it, and so I mean, something more recently that we've done and is I work with organizations that are non-profit organizations within the cities that we have offices. So currently we're primarily based in New York, but I've had, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, New York, right? Where, again, working with colleges that maybe first generation students are coming from, and non-for-profits like Streetwise that are working with individuals who are going back to school and looking for that first professional opportunity. Those are also, again, from a sourcing and opportunity to bring in talent that we may not have seen on LinkedIn or, from a friend, right? Through those referrals as well. And I think we end up bringing in, again, more diverse thought experience to the table. Yeah, I mean, I'm very proud here at Biz2Credit. We've got 20, we currently have around 150 employees in the New York City office or location, and they come from 20 different cultural backgrounds, and have gone to many, many different types of, schools, and have come in. One more recently came in through one of those programs. So again, I think it's not hard. It just, you have to think differently, and then it just becomes part of the DNA. And we don't actually, I don't really have a diversity, like a big diversity plan. It's more like the strategy on a page of the things we've talked about that we just do.
How do you deal with challenges in that diversity? So not in terms of, okay, there are different groups that hate each other. Obviously, that's not what I mean, but more like, okay, people from, like, as you said, first generation university. I remember when I entered my first job, there were just many things I didn't know because I didn't know who to ask, right? And therefore there may be some challenges that are also from the outside perspective, not really there, but bother those who are in that situation greatly.
Yeah, so I think onboarding is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And there'll be the basic onboarding that we'll do with our employees, which is benefits and all of that kind of thing, no matter where. But what we also do is with our early, and part of it's our early career, or we'll look at the background of somebody and ensure that we're big on LinkedIn Learning and Coursera and some other tools there. But we'll also do some on-site lunch and learns. Again, I think part of that is how do we communicate? How do we write an email, and some things to think about, and active listening. So we do that not in so much of a programmatic way, but we look at what we've got talent wise and what are some of the needs, and hold those type of sessions as part of whether it's onboarding or lunch and learns throughout the year. Another program that we're actually piloting right now is early career. Mm-hmm. With our early career, and early career is, maybe they've, individuals that are maybe 1 to 2 years into their career, maybe up to 4, and they're participating as a group in how to focus on their career, and how to think about their career, and how to think about their performance, and how to think about how to have a conversation with their manager. Again, some of it are things that I may have grown up with at Goldman that I just learned because of the type of organization that I belong to, a bit larger. But what I'm seeing in smaller organizations is the need to be a bit more, again, this may be a bit more programmatic and teaching, enrolling, educating our early career professionals in that. And then the other part of that is they're getting some coaching. So it's a 6-month program. I'll tell you more. We're just, kind of a few months into it to see how that goes, but I am excited and optimistic that'll be something that, we'll be able to continue here as well as take out elsewhere.
Okay, tell me more about the program, please.
I will. It's really, I think that there's an independent, just briefly, real quickly on it. There's a independent study component. There's a group study chat. They have to be active. They can't be working and doing something on the side, because they're put into rooms to work through issues or challenges or scenarios, and then there's the coaching piece of it. So again, it's kind of a multi-dimensional learning experience, and yeah, I will tell you more later.
It is super exciting, and what would fascinate me when we first talked was like that you guys approach winning over talents in a very holistic way, in terms of like, hey, of course you have those traditional ways, but it's also about exploring those ways that are not that common, and then therefore enabling people to be the best they can every day.
Yeah, and one thing, I was actually meeting with one of the individuals that works with me, focuses on our engagement, our learning and development, is looking at how we're thinking about performance management going into this next kind of the end of the year, right? And I think I have typically been a bit more traditional in my thought process and how this should work, and I'll just say more structured. But what I shared with Chris yesterday was, what if what would it look like? And if we had the employees just focus on, one of our DNA, one of our, our principles, and, where they had contributed this year, with our customers and internally, because I think that, it starts to get into that. And then also, what they've, because that's, again, is their contribution and their impact to the organization, and it gives them a space to talk. And then from a manager, I think the other piece of that I'm a big fan of is, what should you stop, start, and continue, or start, stop, continue. And that's it. So not have all these, ratings, rankings, because what I'm really looking for, and I think our organization would benefit from, is that development, and are they on a track? And do the employees feel like they're valued? And are they really focused on outcomes? And what does that look like to them? And I think then it gives a more enriched conversation, manager, employee, when they're meeting, than all this other stuff. So I'm not kind of throwing that out and just thinking about how can we do it differently to have a different experience and a different outcome. Again, I'll let you know how that goes, but I think that when I think about the people function and how I can ensure that I'm moving, we're growing, because I think that's something that I always view important. I like organizations, or I join organizations that are in that growth mode, is how can we ensure that growth in a way that we're going to retain people? We're just not going to chew through them because roles are changing, but we're going to enable them, right? And again, if it's not the right org, they can leave, they can move out, but create that environment where they can actually be successful and enable that growth quicker.
Well, you just mentioned, okay, well, you guys focus a lot on outcome, on enablement. So how did you came up with a structure that works for a company? So you have a background in a multinational company, and now you're working in a fintech environment, where you mustn't overthink stuff, but on the other hand, there needs to be a structured process, right?
Yeah. I think there's a balance, right? There's kind of a scale to it. I think that I'm fortunate when I join organizations, I take, and I will say I take time, but I don't take like a long period of time, but I go into an organization and I'm always looking at what are they currently doing, right? And how are, what are the processes they already have in place, not just in HR, but organizationally, right? Look at all the leadership, look at all of that, and then come up with, again, I usually do what I call a SWOT on a page, right? Just a SWOT analysis, and then create this, okay, here's some things that I think are important that we can change, right? Here's some things that, eventually, we may want to think about. And I think, putting that in front of a leadership, founders, board, just depends on where I am at the time. I think enables everyone to think about what's important to the organization and what do they want to look like? I think all culture is aspirational. I don't think I've been anywhere where it's like set in stone, right? And it's just working well. But it gives you that, if I was an artist, right, it gives you that the white space to create that org and to put those into practices. And I think there's always some structure. I remember at Velocity, we were putting in performance management, and the CEO there was like, well, I want to do rate and rank. Okay, we've never done performance management, but okay, so let's do something, very basic. And then we got, the managers in a room, and we actually, we had them rank their team, and then we had other people, kind of provide input. And, the first time we did that, the first quarter we did that, it was a very long day. It was really very painful because nobody knew what it meant and how to do it. And then after that, what we found is it really enabled us. And again, that was very structured. Mm-hmm. Every quarter after that, it became shorter and shorter because we were focusing then on the collaboration between the teams. And if you were in the top 25, that was really, it was great. It led to more of a, a kicker on a bonus. You had more opportunities, and it was because that became our rising stars in theory, right? But it started, and it was very structured. And I have to say, I was not, I was like, oh, wow, I'm not sure, right? From a people perspective, how successful we'll be, but we were very successful. I haven't necessarily implemented Rate and Rank anywhere else, but it worked for that org, right? And that culture and the leadership of that, of that company. And so I think in my mind, I've got to be pretty agile in how I, again, help organizations. And I feel like that's what I am. I'm really that enabler of the growth that they're looking for. How do we get there in a way that organization can absorb it and take it to the next level? And it isn't always the same.
Isn't always the same. It's a good point you make. And well, since you have worked for so many different organizations, you have worked for so many, in so many different sectors, so many different locations. So what is kind of a constant thing that guides you?
I'm always listening. I think that active listening has been critical, and processing. I write everything down. I've tried, on an iPad. I've tried lots of different methods, but what I've found is listening and then taking notes. And so for me, that's been my constant, because then I can go back to my toolkit and think about how do we want to, like, what's important. So do we have a lot of early career people, or do we have, I've run some, basic management training sessions. I call them Management 101, because I also find that's pretty runs through every org. Just as much as we want to believe we're all, great managers. I think that's a constant, is just making sure managers are trained, they understand their role and responsibility with employees, and making sure employees understand what their role and responsibilities are. I'd say another is just, I don't like surprises. I'm still always surprised, but I'm not a fan of like performance surprises. And so that's where I spend, again, I think a constant is working through, are we clear about what we're hiring someone to do? And that starts back at the, very basic job description, the interview process, the onboarding process. And yeah, you're going to have a few oopses, but all of that, the more consistent you are, the more successful you are at retaining your talent, because you're clear from the interview process through that life cycle. And I think that's, again, we haven't really talked too much about that, but I think all of those pieces are really important.
You mentioned before that those interviews at Goldman with like rocket scientists, PhD, were pretty fascinating. So can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, I think the one, I do think culture fit's important. I think that you may have spoken with other, individuals that are focused on the people field, and they're like, oh no, we don't really focus on culture. I still hold dear culture. I think a fit is a fit, and someone may have the right skills, but may not fit into the organization. And we just can't hire them because it'll be disruptive. And unless I'm wanting that disruption, which again, we may be, right, looking for disruption, won't go that way. And I think what I learned at Goldman in interviewing those PhD candidates was, how are they going to fit in with what we're trying to build? It was clear to me what we were going to build. I really was pretty young, and I wasn't really a culture carrier at that point in time at Goldman. So I didn't really know the culture as much, but I knew what we were looking to build and what we were looking to achieve and the outcomes we were looking for. And would these, candidates be able to fit into that? And you have to make those decisions and go with it. And so I think that's the other thing, is just, I go with my gut. I do.
How can I develop those guts?
Oh man, I think that you have to have the confidence to know that you're going to make a few mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you learn by, again, I'll say active listening, by observing and listening to peers, leaders, even others, in the network that of their experiences, to ensure that I'm getting, I think that someone is getting that, that sense. It's almost, maybe we call it a sixth sense, right? That it's, how do you really know? And I think that's how I know. I feel not cocky about it. I just think it's now that's what I do. I feel good about that intuition that I have on people. I will check it. Right. I'm always, kind of checking that from time to time. But I do think that you have to, the other piece of it, I think you really have to have a good business sense. Mm-hmm. So whatever business I've been a part of, I do take time, again, to learn about the industry, to learn about the company. How do we make our money? I don't play in just my swim lane. I think that has enabled me. Again, I'll just go back to my, growing up at Goldman days. I think that I was a member of the team. It didn't matter what function, what division I was sitting in, whether I was in HR or I was in investment management or fixed income. I was a member of the team. And I think that the more I took time to understand what a trader was trading, one of my initiatives had nothing to do with people. It was a P&L. I helped put together P&L for the traders. I was really more focused on finance, right? In that sense. And how do you do that? And so I think by learning that, then I was able to, okay, what makes a good trader? What makes a good sales? What makes a good research professional? Because I understood what they were doing.
So like not being just a business partner, but being a real business guy.
Yeah, I would say that's a good, I do spend time even today coaching, right? Just helping move people through their moments, right? Their roles or some little issue. It's just, it's an art. Mm-hmm. As well as the science.
How do you picture HR talent acquisition in particular in 10 years?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a very tough question.
It's a tough, I think it will be different. I'm not, I don't think it will be as AI magic as sometimes I hear. Mm-hmm. I guess I think that there's still going to be a people piece to it. Yeah. I do think that the resumes will not be, I think they're becoming less and less important. Mm-hmm. And there's other ways of finding out about people than just the resume. But I do think it's going to be very outcome. Like, what have you, how do again, it'll be focused on how do people work and how do they engage and are they driven and are they learners? There's things that I think about that are important to me that I think that will kind of change. I'm sure LinkedIn wants to hear they're still going to be going to LinkedIn, right? But I don't think it's going to be, I definitely don't think it's going to be the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, from an HR AI tech perspective, I do totally agree with you. I think the component on is there a cultural fit? Is there a personal fit? Is like incredibly important. I think what is perhaps good at AI and what can be very well done with AI is probably everything prior to the interview. So like staying in touch, I think their AI can help a lot. So like, getting rid of manual work that doesn't contribute like too much in the entire process.
Yep, but I also think that when I think about from a sourcing perspective, I do think that AI will enable profiles to be seen differently.
Exactly.
I do think that, again, it may be scary, but you'll get a sense of the whole person, not just what they've put on paper. Right. And so I think that's the piece that is actually very exciting, because I think we've missed that. I think, one component of talent acquisition that I think that gets missed, and something I focused on a lot when I was at Avaya, was internal mobility. Right. And I think that we do hire for the role that's right in front of us. Right. And we don't really think about, if we're looking for some other role, we don't think about what do we already have in our talent pool that they actually may also be great at that. Right. And so how do we, work through that internally, which I think is really important in every organization. But also, how do we gather that, right, as part of AI, so that we're putting those type of candidates in front of an organization, or the talent acquisition team, and which is that whole person, right?
And I think that also, like, so many things you have said basically culminate into this, right? So like, hey, how can technology help to discover those people whose talents are hidden because they don't know how to sell their talents, right? So which is nowadays, I think, terrible injustice. There are some people very well taught how to present skills they have while others can't, right?
Yeah, and it's just they're at a disadvantage, right? So how do we? I saw a resume today, someone forwarded to me, and an individual that's graduating, a resume that I'm like, I don't know what this is really saying. And I mean, instead of like, am I going to hire, not hire, or interview or not interview, I actually want to call this person and say, do you want me some help with your resume? Right? Because it's not showing. I don't even know this person, who they are, and this person may just be disadvantaged in that, like that that's not something they picked up at school. I'm not, I don't know how to. Those are things that I think we do want to solve for from a talent pool perspective, because to me that's showing the advantage disadvantage.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't have to do with school. I just think something's missing, and I do think that COVID played a role in that, because I do think that we're missing. Some of the students coming out of school are missing some of those experiences. And we'll have to maybe AI can help us do that, figure out how to give them that, kind of give them that more equal footing.
Well, what has been your single most amazing situation in your career as a talent acquisition HR professional? Almost exciting, so something that you look back to very favorably.
I love, I mean, I have to tell you, I loved my experience at Bankrate, and I'll tell you why. I think we were able, it was new CEO, company'd been around 30 years. I had actually, worked with Bankrate, or worked, the mortgage rate sheets were actually pieces of paper when I was at Goldman. So I knew who the company was. Anyway, they were going through a change, or needed to go through a change. And so they brought in a new CEO, and Ken was just amazing. And so we looked at our 3 businesses and acquired some businesses, and then divested of one. But what made that, and what I'm most proud about, is within the bank, one of the core companies, bankrate.com, we actually switched out probably more than 50% of the employees while increasing revenue. And we didn't stop a beat. I mean, there was no, and some of the change was we hired a new, but the focus was to become more digitally enabled company. And some of that was, we didn't need as much focus on content. So we did some was employee based, right? Some it was, some people weren't going to get us, got us here, but they weren't going to get us there. So some of that was changed, hiring in new. And we really did change it around within 18 months. And so I am extremely proud of that, because the wheels did not come off, or the wings on the plane did not let us go down. And that's not easy to do. And we were publicly held. There had been, many challenges, and we drove through, and it was fun. Everyone came in really excited about the change. And again, for change management, talent acquisition, it really was amazing. And I'd say that team, not just the HR team, but the team is we still email each other. They get together. I mean, it tells that we really built that culture and built a really amazing company, and we sold it. It's all
That's
good.
amazing. Debbie, thank you so much for all your insights. It was a great pleasure talking to you. Great pleasure learning about what you have done, how successful HR organizations can be built up. Thanks a lot. It was a great pleasure.
You're welcome. My honor. I really, it was fun to talk about some of the opportunities I've had.
And all you guys, thanks for listening in. Looking forward to our next episode. Bye-bye.